Okay, in Parshas Matos, we find that the Jewish people went out to war against the Midianites to take vengeance from the Midianites for having seduced the Jewish men into immorality and idolatry. As we know, 24,000 Jews died because of that wicked counsel from Bilam. And the Jewish people, on the instructions of Hashem, went out and fought against Midian. And the Torah tells us that when the army came back from the war, Moses, Elazar the Kohen, and all the leaders of the assembly went out to meet them outside the camp. They're coming back from the war, you go out and meet them. Moses was angry with the commanders of the army, the officers of the thousands and the officers of the hundreds who came from the legion of the battle. Why was he angry? Moses said to them, "Did you let every female live? Behold, they caused the children of Israel by the word of Bilam to commit a betrayal against Hashem regarding the matter of Peor, and the plague occurred in the assembly of Hashem." So Moses was saying to the commanders of the army, I don't understand. What is the matter with you people? These are the very women who caused the Jewish people to fall into this dreadful sin. These are the very women who brought about the plague that killed 24,000 Jews. I send you out to war to take vengeance against the Midianites, and you leave them alive. You leave the women alive, these very same women. Pharaoh was very angry with them. And then he gives instructions that you must go and you must kill every woman who has known lying with a male, and etc. Now they also brought back booty. Obviously, you understand, they went out to war, they were successful, they were victors. The victors always get the spoils, they have the booty. So they brought back with them vessels of gold and vessels of silver, all wonderful things. And Moshe tells them, he says, you've got to kasher those utensils. You've got to purify the utensils. But interestingly enough, the Torah then goes on and says, Elazar the Kohen said to the men of the legion who came to the battle, this is the decree of the Torah which Hashem commanded Moses. Only the gold and the silver, the copper, the iron, the tin and the lead, everything that comes into the fire, you shall pass through the fire. Elazar is teaching the Jewish people the halachas of Tfilas Kelim. He himself says, this is the law of the Torah which Hashem commanded Moses. Moses was the one who had been taught by Hashem how you have to tovel kelim that come from Goyim. But Elazar is the one who's standing up there and teaching the halachas. Moshe is present, but Moshe keeps shtum, and Elazar, the Talmud, is teaching the Jewish people the halachas. What on earth is going on over here? Why should Elazar be the one to teach them the halachas? In fact, we know that Rabbi Elazar Gadol taught us that a Talmud who paskins halacha in front of the Rebbe is chayav misa. Is liable to a death sentence. So why is Elazar teaching the halachas and not Moshe? So Rashi, on the spot, comes along, and Rashi tells us the following. He says, because Moses came into the category of anger, he came into the category of error. For the laws of purging the vessels by non-Jews were concealed from him. You hear what happened over here? Because Moses got angry. Remember, we said Moses got angry with the commanders of the army, and he was angry. The moment he got angry, he forgot the halachas. He lost his wisdom. He forgot the halachas. So there's Moshe Rabbeinu standing. The people have to be taught the halachas, and he can't teach it to them. He's forgotten them because he got angry. That's why Elazar has to teach the halachas, because Moshe is not capable of teaching these halachas. Anger caused him to lose his wisdom. And Rashi points out, based on the Gemara and the Medrash, this is not the first time it's happened. This is not an isolated incident that when Moshe gets angry, or anybody gets angry for that matter, but we're learning it here in the Chumash from Moshe. 3 times Moshe got angry, and every single time he got angry, he forgot the halacha. Where are the 3 times he got angry? So, here is one of them. He got angry with the commanders of the army, he forgot the halachas and Tfilas Keilim. He instructed the Jewish people at the time when the man fell, don't leave over man until the next day. You're not allowed to leave man overnight. And of course there were always people like Dasan and Aviram who deliberately left over man until the next day. And Moshe got angry. And because Moshe got angry, he forgot the laws of Shabbos which he was supposed to teach him on that occasion. It was occasion number 2. Occasion number 3, after the death, if you remember, on the 8th day of the inauguration, after the death of Nadav and Avihu, Aaron HaKohen, because he was in a situation of aninus, he was in a situation of being an oinen, he didn't eat one of the korbanos of the day. And if you remember, Moshe got very angry. He said, why didn't you eat from this korban? He got angry. And Aaron explained it to him. And Moshe said, you're right. I forgot the halacha. So we had 3 times, according to this, 3 times that Moshe got angry, and every single time he got angry, he forgot the halachas. There's another version that substitutes the Shabbos one for the incident where he hit the rock instead of speaking to the rock. There again he got angry. You remember what happened is he's standing in front of the rock. He's meant to speak to the rock and make a big Kiddush Hashem. There are a whole lot of wise guys who are mocking and scoffing. And they're saying, Moshe, you know, you're a shepherd. You've got experience in rocks. You know which rocks have water inside and which rocks don't have water inside. So if you want to do a miracle, and speak to the rock and impress us, we'll choose the rock. Don't you speak to the rock because you know which rock to speak to. Let us choose the rock and make water come out of the rock that we'll choose. And then they're mocking and they're scoffing. So Moshe gets angry, if you remember, and he says, listen here, you rebels. He gets angry. Because he gets angry, what happens? He doesn't do what he's supposed to do. He doesn't speak to the rock, he hits the rock. So we have 3 very graphic examples of this principle that Rashi has brought to us here. When a person gets angry, he loses his wisdom. In fact, as I pointed out to you, it's in fact a Gemara. Let me quote the Gemara to you. The Gemara is in Psachim, page 66b. Reish Lakish says, concerning any person who becomes angry. This is not just something that happens to a Moshe Rabbeinu. This is not something that if you're on those high elevated levels, these things happen and, it doesn't affect us lesser mortals. Says Reish Lakish, no, any person who becomes angry, if he is a wise man, his wisdom deserts him. And he brings these examples here from Moshe Rabbeinu. You see, if you're a wise man, your wisdom deserts you when you get angry. If he is a prophet, his prophecy deserts him. What's the proof? The proof is we find that at one point in time, Elisha, the prophet, the great prophet Elisha, he's very angry with Jehoram, the king of Israel. And he speaks to Jehoram, the king of Israel, and he says, what have I to do with you?
Hi, Sharon.
Were it not that I esteem the face of Yehoshaphat, king of Yehudah, I would neither gaze upon you nor look upon you. These were very angry words. He was saying, if you, I hold nothing. The only reason why I even bother to look at you is because of Yehoshaphat, the king of Yehudah. But you, Yehoram, wouldn't even look at you under normal circumstances. He was angry. What does the Nach tell us? Straight after this, the Nach tells us that Elisha says, now take for me a musician And it was when the musician played, and it came upon him the hand of Hashem, etc. Meaning what? He had to get a musician to come and play music in front of him to calm him down, to bring him back to his state of menuchas hanefesh. He was so angry that the prophecy left him, and he felt that the prophecy had left him, and therefore he had to call for a musician to play music for him, to calm him down, to get rid of the anger, so that his prophecy could come back to him. That's the second point we see. But it doesn't stop there. Ramani Bar Parsha said, whoever becomes angry, even if they are in the midst of conferring greatness upon him from heaven, they will bring him down. A person could have been singled out from Shemayim for greatness, but if he has this midah, this characteristic of anger, he's going to lose it. He's going to lose the greatness that he was destined to get from Shemayim. Where do we see that? Comes the Gemara and it says, you know that at a certain point in time, Hashem said to the prophet Samuel, you must go now to the house of Yisrael, the house of Jesse, and you must appoint a new king to replace Shaul from one of the sons of Yishai. And Shmuel goes to the house of Jesse, and he says to Jesse, I want to see your sons. And Jesse puts all his sons in front of him, except for David HaMelech. He leaves David HaMelech out in the field because he thought definitely can't be David HaMelech. And Shmuel takes a look at Eliav, and he's very impressed. Eliav is the eldest son. He's very impressed. He's absolutely sure this is the man. This is the next king. He saw greatness. He saw region. He saw majesty in this man. Hashem says to Samuel, don't look at his countenance and at his tall stature, for I have rejected him. It is not as man perceives it. A man sees what is visible to the eyes, but God sees into the heart. Now, let's just understand what happened over here. Shmuel is a great prophet. He is a magnificently great prophet. If Shmuel looks at a person, it's true, maybe he can't see right into the depths of his heart. Sure not. But he must have still been able to see greatness in this man. Shmuel couldn't have been so deceived, so wrong, that he could have made such a terrible mistake. He must have seen greatness in Eliav. And the truth of the matter is there was greatness in Eliav. And Eliav, at one stage, Hashem himself had the idea that Eliav would be the next king. That's why Shmuel saw it. That's why Shmuel felt it. There was greatness in this man. But what happened? What happened? Hashem looks into the heart. He looks into the essence of a human being, and he saw that this Eliav has got this midah of anger. And it revealed itself sometime after that. Because what happened sometime after that is that the Jewish people went to war, and they were all at the battlefront, and David comes with the best intentions of the world to bring food and supplies to his brothers who are in the army. He came there with absolutely good intentions. But when this Eliav saw his brother David coming to the battlefield, says the Nach, and Eliav's anger burned against David. And he said, why is this that you came down? And with whom did you forsake those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your willfulness and the evil of your heart, for you came down only in order to observe the war. He got tremendously angry with David for no good reason. That's what Hashem saw. Hashem saw that he's got this midah of anger, and therefore he said, no, even though originally I felt kindly towards Eliav, but now Hashem says, I have become disgusted with him. I've rejected him. Why? Because of this midah of anger. So, I think you can see yourself. Let's take stock of what we've learned just from the Gemara over here. A person who's got the midah of anger, if you're wise, you're going to lose your wisdom. If you're a prophet, you're going to lose your prophecy. If you were destined for greatness from heaven, and you have this midah of anger, they're going to take it away from you. This is very bad news. One last point. One of the big tragedies, one of the major tragedies that took place in Jewish history, we find in the Nach, is what's known as the incident of the concubine of Givah. It was a terribly, terribly tragic story in which tens of thousands of Jews got killed in a civil war between the tribe of Binyamin on the one side and all the other tribes on the other side. What happened? What happened is that there was a Jewish man who had a concubine who ran away from his house back to her father's house. And after a while the man came to bring her back to his house. And on the way back, when they were traveling home, they stopped in a certain place in the territory of Binyamin. And certain Rishoim from the tribe of Binyamin, they came and they attacked her, spent the whole night raping her, and she died. Horrible incident. And the people of Binyamin were not prepared to bring the perpetrators to book. They were not prepared to bring them to justice. They were just going to let it go, let it pass. So this husband of hers, he called all the other tribes together, and they went and they had a civil war against Binyamin. And as I said, tens of thousands of Jews died. 40,000 soldiers of the army of Israel died in the first 2 days of the battle. 25,000 men of Binyamin fell on the third day. You're talking about 65,000 Jews died in those 3 days of battle. But what started it? Why did she run away? Why did this concubine run away from her husband? And that's what started the whole thing. So the Gemara in Gittin tells us there's two opinions. The one is that she served her husband food which had a fly in it. The second opinion was she served her husband food which had a hair in it. And he got so angry. He got so angry with her. How dare you serve me food which has either a hair or a fly in it? That she was so afraid of his anger. That's why she ran away. That's why she ran away. And that's what started this whole incident. The Gemara in Gittin also tells us that a man should never instill excessive fear in his household. He should never be a person who will get so angry that people in his household will be so afraid of his anger. Because why? Because, says the Gemara, he can bring his family to 3 major transgressions: illicit relations, bloodshed, and desecration of the Sabbath. Just through anger. If a man is so full of anger that his family is so afraid of his anger, he can bring them to 3 major transgressions. Bloodshed, well, we saw. That was the story of the concubine of Givah. It came to bloodshed. Why bloodshed and why illicit relations and desecration of the Sabbath? If a woman, for whatever reason, neglected to either light the candles or put the food on before Shabbos, and she's now afraid of her husband's anger, what will her husband say if she tells him, look, I didn't put the food on in time to cook for Shabbos or whatever it is? She's so afraid of his anger. What's she going to do? She's going to cook it on Shabbos. She's going to cook it on Shabbos just to avoid his anger. Or she's too afraid to tell her husband that for whatever reason she didn't go to the mikveh when she should have gone to the mikveh. And she's too afraid to tell him that. What's going to happen? She's going to lie. She's going to lie to him. She's going to say, I went to the mikveh when she didn't. And it's a terrible, terrible aveira. These are the effects of anger. These are the effects of anger. It will come as no surprise, therefore, that the Rambam comes along and the Rambam tells us as follows. The Rambam says to us that normally when it comes to character traits, when it comes to midas, a man should always go along the golden mean. Don't go to extremes. Don't go to extremes. Whatever midah, whatever characteristic it is, don't go to the one extreme to the other. There's a golden mean. Go along the middle path. Don't be too stingy. Don't be too spendthrift. But says the Rambam, there are two character traits that you don't go along the middle path. You go to the complete extreme and you just don't have these midas in your makeup at all. They are midas that you have to eliminate completely. What are those two? The one is arrogance and the other one is anger. There's no place for anger. There's no place for anger. You've got to be able to control your anger. Now, let's go back and look at one or two very fascinating things about this. If you have a professor of mathematics, professor of engineering, professor of law, professor of medicine, anything you like, huge intellectual person, who's got a tremendous amount of wisdom, and one day he gets very angry. Something makes him very angry. Is this professor of mathematics going to lose his wisdom? The next day he can't remember theorems, he can't remember any mathematical principles. Or if he's a professor of engineering and something got him very angry, now he can't remember his engineering, he can't remember his law, he can't remember his thing. Why? Why should a person lose his wisdom, his knowledge that he's acquired over many, many years? Why should he lose it? Because he gets angry. What's the mechanism? But that's what we saw. That's what Rashi told us. That's what the Gemara showed us. Moshe got angry. He lost his wisdom. He forgot halachas. How does this mechanism work? Why should you forget your wisdom when you get angry? So, I want to share with you an insight from Reb Chaim Shmulevitz Zatzal. He says as follows. How does anger make one's previously acquired knowledge disappear? How does one lose wisdom which one already possesses? And he says the following. He says the answer is that Torah differs from other forms of wisdom. Other forms of wisdom do not relate to the personality or character of its possessor. A person may be wicked or obnoxious and yet retain a storehouse of knowledge and wisdom. Mathematics, engineering, law, medicine, politics, economics, whatever wisdom you want, secular wisdom that you want to choose, has no bearing upon the personality or the character of the person who learns these things. It makes absolutely no difference what sort of a personality it is. You learn mathematics, you learn mathematics. You know it, you know it. It's got nothing to do with your personality, your character. Says Reb Chaim, not so the Torah. The Torah ensconces itself and finds its place only in the personality of the Talmid Chacham. Torah is intrinsically bound up with our personality and our character traits. In what way? He says a person who becomes unfit to retain Torah loses it. A person who becomes unfit to retain Torah loses it. Even the knowledge that he already acquired leaves him. What is Reb Chaim telling us? He's telling us an absolutely amazing and frightening thing. Hashem is telling us that my Torah can only be acquired and retained in a person who is fit to be a vessel to hold my Torah. My Torah is not ordinary wisdom. It's not secular wisdom that it doesn't matter. If you're obnoxious, if you're wicked, it doesn't matter. Torah can only be acquired and retained by a person who is fitting to hold Torah within him. You have to be a vessel that is appropriate for the sanctity of Torah. And that's why he comes along and he says, if a person becomes sullied, his character becomes sullied, for whatever reason, he loses the ability to be a vessel for the Torah. And that's why he loses his Torah wisdom. That's why he loses his Torah knowledge, because you're no longer fit to be a vessel to hold this sacred, precious treasure of Torah, if you have become sullied in your character traits. Now, anger, the Gemara says over and over again, it gives all kinds of statements. He who becomes angry does not respect even the divine presence. When people get angry, they have no God. They become like idolaters, says the Gemara. Why? Because when you become angry, you just lose all sense of proportion, you lose all sense of rationality. That anger just drives you to do all kinds of things. It's like you don't have a God, you don't have any more controls, restrictions, you just let fly. He who becomes angry is possessed by all sorts of purgatory. He who becomes angry is a sign that one's sins are greater than one's merits. There are all kinds of statements all over the Talmud about anger. And Rav Chaim has now explained to us what's the mechanism. What's the mechanism that you lose your wisdom, you lose your prophecy, you lose whatever Hashem was going to give you greatness? How does it work? You've not retained the fitness to be a vessel, a receptacle for Torah. So as much as we all strive, comes Shavuos time. You remember when we came to Shavuos time, we said that Shavuos is a Rosh Hashanah, it's a day of judgment for Torah. And therefore comes Shavuos time, everybody is trying their best to make sure that they can now show HaKadosh Baruch Hu, look Hashem, I'm going to be a good vessel for Torah, please give me the gift of Torah. And we look to improve our midas, and we look to take on new learning schedules and improve our mitzvahs, etc., because we want to show Hashem that we are fitting vessels for Torah, so that He's going to grant us the gift of Torah. But what Rav Chaim is telling us now is something more. It's not enough that you have to make yourself into a fit vessel to acquire Torah. You have to maintain yourself as a fit vessel to keep the Torah that you've already learnt. Otherwise it can get taken away. Okay, so that's the next thing I want to show you. And there's a frightening example, by the way, of this. It's nothing to do with anger. It's nothing to do with anger, but it's a frightening example because it shows us how even the greatest people, if they don't maintain themselves, so to speak, at a certain level, they lose their Torah. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 primary disciples. Huge Tanoim. Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, Rabbi Yeshua ben Hananiah, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon ben Ansal, and Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. And the greatest of them all was Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. He was the greatest of the 5 of Talmidim of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. What happened to him? So the Gemara in Shabbos comes along and tells us that what happened when his Rebbe died. When his Rebbe died, unlike his colleagues, he did not remain with them in the Beis Medrash at Yavne. Upon the urging of his wife, he moved to a place called Amaos. Why did his wife want to go to Amaos? Why didn't she allow her husband to remain in the Beis Medrash at Yavne with all his colleagues? Because it was a resort famous for its fine cuisine and refreshing baths. Fine cuisine and refreshing baths. It was a place of Gashmias.
Cape Town.
Sorry?
Cape Town.
Cape Town, whatever. Cape Town, Plet, Sun City, I don't know. Whatever it was. It was a case of fine cuisine and refreshing baths, and she persuaded her husband to go out of the Beis Medrash in Yavne with his colleagues and go up there because it was such a very nice, physically attractive place to live. And she said, don't worry, your colleagues will follow you. You're the greatest of them all. They'll follow you here to learn from you. She made a big mistake. They didn't follow him there. They didn't follow him there. He remained there by himself. With all the fine cuisine and all the refreshing baths, he remained there by himself. And what was the result of it? He found himself alone without the intellectual ferment necessary for growth. And the Gemara tells us, Shabbos 147b, the Gemara tells us that he completely forgot his learning to the extent that he was unable to read from the Torah. He couldn't even read from the Torah. He misread the words in the Torah. The Torah says, HaChodesh hazeh lachem, Rosh Chodashim. And when he read the Torah, instead of reading HaChodesh hazeh lachem, he read HaCharesh haya libam. That's what happened to him. He lost his Torah. If you don't maintain yourself as a fit vessel for the Torah, you lose the Torah. Okay. Now, the next thing that I want to share with you on this subject, why anger is such a dangerous character trait, more dangerous than many other of the character traits. Is it too hot, too cold? Should I switch off the heater? What? Okay, everybody are out. Why anger is such a dangerous character trait is because we tend to justify it. It's very difficult to justify some of the other bad character traits. It's very difficult to justify why am I a jealous person. Very difficult to justify jealousy. Very difficult to justify some of the other bad character traits. But anger we justify because we say, but I was entitled to be angry. I was entitled to be angry. The fellow did this, that, and the next thing, and I'm entitled to be angry. Well, is that a valid excuse? Can we say that when we get angry, even though the Torah tells us all the dangers and the terrible effects of being angry, are we entitled to vindicate ourselves by saying, oh, but look what he did. I was entitled to be angry. Let's go back to those 3 examples of Moshe Rabbeinu. Was he entitled to be angry? In each one of those cases where he got angry, was he entitled to be angry? Well, let's look at them again. You're standing in front of a whole group of Jews and you want to do an amazing miracle. You want to do an amazing miracle which is supposed to bring about a tremendous Kiddush Hashem. And instead of having a respectful audience who is now appreciating the fact that you are about to show them a tremendous miracle, a tremendous Kiddush Hashem, they are mocking and they're scoffing and they're making a balagan out of the whole thing. Is Moshe entitled to get angry with them and say, here now you rebels? Mistama is entitled to be angry. Yeah? The commanders come back from the army. You bring back alive the very women who caused the Jewish men to sin. You bring them back alive. We went to war to avenge what these women did. You bring them back alive. Is Moshe not entitled to get angry? Stop, he's entitled to get angry. You give a specific instruction. Don't leave the man over until the next day. You get people who deliberately disobey you. Deliberately disobey you. Are you not entitled to get angry? Aaron HaKohen, I gave you instructions to eat the sacrifices, etc. If you thought that it wasn't right that you should eat the sacrifices, shouldn't you have come to me and said, Moshe Rabbeinu, seems to me that there's something wrong here. Ask me to paskin. You paskined without me. You just decided by yourself. Even if you were right, but you paskined by yourself. You didn't come to me, the Rebbe. Isn't Moshe entitled to get angry? And what do you see? Justification is no justification. He lost his wisdom. On each one of those 3 occasions, he lost his wisdom. So the Torah is telling us what? Justification. The fact that you feel justified in getting angry does not allow you to get angry because you still suffer the consequences. Yeah.
Didn't he get angry when he smashed the tablets as well? With no consequences there.
It's not true. It's not true that there were no consequences there. But let's leave.
Not for him.
I thought there was an opinion that it got too heavy.
Let's leave that for the moment. It's not the one. That's not one of the ones they bring. But what I'm trying to show you, it's a good point, but it's not the one that they bring. It's you see what the Torah is telling us over here. Even if you are entitled, you were entitled to get angry. You shouldn't get angry. You have to control yourself. Is it possible? Is it possible for people with such provocation? Is it possible not to get angry, or even if you do get angry, to control your anger because of all the bad effects of anger? So let me bring you a modern day example from Rav Moshe Feinstein, Zeichet Tzadik Livracha. Rav Moshe Feinstein, as we all know, was the posek of the generation. He was the leading posek of the generation. His halachic decisions, everybody just sits there with an open mouth. You know, from Igros Moshe, this is the man. If anybody knew halacha in Klal Yisrael in the days of Rav Moshe Feinstein, it was Rav Moshe Feinstein. A fellow writes a letter to Rav Moshe Feinstein, and he rebukes him. He criticizes him. And what's he criticizing him on? A point of halacha. And he's saying to Rav Moshe Feinstein, he says, how can you be seen driving a motor car in public after candle lighting on a Friday afternoon? Rav Moshe Feinstein was driving to shul on Friday afternoon after candle lighting. So this chela writes a letter and he criticizes and he rebukes Rav Moshe Feinstein for driving after candle lighting on a Friday afternoon. Now, I don't know whether this fella didn't stop to think for one moment, who are you writing to? I mean, does he think for one moment that Rav Moshe Feinstein, the posek of the generation, doesn't know a simple law of Shabbos? He doesn't think that Rav Moshe Feinstein, when he got into his car after candle lighting, Moshe Feinstein didn't know that the halacha is this or that or the next thing. So he writes a letter of rebuke to Rav Moshe Feinstein to criticize him. You don't know the halacha. You're making public chilul Shabbos. Now, if anybody would be entitled to get angry at this point, I would have thought that Rav Moshe Feinstein would be entitled to get angry. I am the Posek Hador, and you coming along and telling me that I don't even know a basic halacha of Shabbos, and that I am publicly desecrating the Shabbos? How does he respond to this fellow? How does he respond to this fellow? He writes him a letter. It's published in Egris Moshe. He says, I was very happy that Malos Kavoidoi. Malos Kavoidoi is an extremely respectful title. He's speaking to this chap who has the chutzpah to accuse him of not knowing the halacha. He writes to him and he calls him Malos Kavoidoi. Malos Kavoidoi means his exalted honor. I was very happy that Malos Kavoidoi was so zealous in fulfilling the mitzvah of rebuke according to his understanding. And chas v'sholem, that I should be upset at this. Chas v'sholem, I should be upset that he rebuked me, that he told me I don't know what I'm talking about. Bli neder, he says, I will no longer travel in a car during the time of candle lighting, even though there is absolutely no prohibition in it, and it's not even maris ayin. And Rav Moshe then goes and writes a whole tshuva in which he proves that there was absolutely nothing wrong halachically in what he did. He was 100% correct according to halacha. 100% correct according to halacha, and it's not even maris ayin. It's not even that you could have bad thoughts about it. So after completely refuting the arguments of this fella, he ends off saying, look how he ends off to this man. He says, from his beloved, who blesses him with the merit of the mitzvah of rebuke that he did for the honor of Hashem Yisborach and for the honor of Shabbos Kodesh. Gives him a big bracha. So it's possible. It's quite possible you can overcome anger. You can overcome anger and you can still keep your cool and write back such a letter. So, well, our defense that when we get angry, we're entitled to, we're not doing anything wrong because we were justified in getting angry. Look what the other guy did. Look how he behaved. Look how he spoke to me. Look what he said to me. Doesn't wash. Doesn't wash. There's another reason why we sometimes don't hold ourselves back and we let fly in anger. And what's that? We think we're acting for the sake of heaven. We see another Jew doing something which is wrong, and we think to ourselves, well, I must act for the sake of heaven. We become zealots, we become Pinchas, like we saw last week. This Jew's doing wrong, I must go and give it to him. I must give him a peace of mind. You can't act like this. You're going against the halacha. So let me share with you a true story from Rav Avram Pamzatzal about people who think that they are upholding the halacha and that entitles them to get angry when they see people not doing what the halacha demands. Rav Pam would relate an incident which occurred to one family on the Seder night, that threatened to tear apart their shalom bayis. The Seder table was filled from end to end with children, relatives, and guests. The long-awaited Shulchan Aruch, the festival meal, arrived, and the balabusta began serving the meal. When she brought out the main course, the husband realized to his horror that the meat was roasted. In front of the relatives and guests, he exploded in anger at his wife. How can you do this to me? On Pesach night you give me roast beef? Don't you know that it is strictly forbidden to do this at the Seder? Bursts out in anger. The poor woman burst into tears and went running into the kitchen, deeply embarrassed by her mistake and her husband's angry reaction. The joyful atmosphere at the table was ruined, and the couple's shalom bias was severely shaken. Now, says Rav Pam, let's just analyze. Let's just analyze what happened here. The woman had tried very hard to please her husband by preparing a yontiv meal with his favorite dish, roast beef. She wanted to please him. In the tumult of the pre-Pesach days in the home, and we all know, the ladies all know what goes on in the home just before Pesach, everybody's tumult. So in the tumult of the pre-Pesach preparations in the home, she had completely forgotten that the minhag is not to eat roasted meat at the Seder, so it shouldn't be confused with the Korban Pesach. The woman made an innocent mistake because of all the tumult. Nonetheless, he says, Rav Pam, had the husband reacted calmly to this dilemma instead of with an outburst of anger, he would have discovered that there were a number of options for dealing with this mistake. You see, as we said at the beginning, when you get angry, your wisdom leaves you. You can't think rationally, you can't think straight because you're just burning with anger. If this guy would have just kept calm and kept cool, he would have said to himself, what can be done? Is there a way out? And says Rav Pam, if he would have just gone and looked up in the Mishnah Brura what to do, he would have found a very simple solution. Because the Mishnah Brura comes along and the Mishnah Brura quotes the Magen Avraham, and he says all he needed to do, if it wasn't Shabbos, and most times Seder night's not Shabbos, he could have just said to his wife, calmly, quietly, in the kitchen, not in front of everybody, take the roast beef, put it into a pot with water, cook it for a few minutes so that it becomes cooked. Instead of roasted, just cook it in water, boil it up in water for a few minutes, and it's fine. It's 100%. It's all it would have taken. So, we can't even get angry when we see other people doing things wrong, because there's a way to handle it. There's a way to handle it. Says Rav Pam, it is tragic that some parents inflict lifelong emotional scars on their children by not controlling their tempers. In fits of rage, they call their children derogatory and demeaning names like moron, fool, idiot, little realizing the damage they are causing them. Later, they wonder why psychologists diagnose their children as suffering from severe inferiority complexes. If the kid has heard his parent calling him an idiot and a moron and a fool and this and that and the next thing, you don't expect them to have an inferiority complex. And he says they inflict lifelong emotional scars. Says Rav Pam, as a result of uncontrolled rage, marriages are ruined, families are broken, friendships are destroyed, business partnerships are dissolved. Anger brings with it entire package of serious sins. Once anger is released, it is very difficult to control it or to restrain its far-reaching consequences. So, Aboisa, I think we all understand now the dangers of anger and what anger leads to, and I'm sure we all suffer from it from one degree or another, and we need to control it. We need to control it. Now, I just end off by saying that this shir should be for the Aliyah's Neshama of our late dear friend Leib's Erenstam. His yahrzeit was just recently. And what's very interesting Leibs, as you know, was a Kohen. He was very proud of the fact that he was a Kohen. But you know, the Kohenim are particularly susceptible and vulnerable to anger. It's a fact. Kohenim are particularly vulnerable and susceptible to anger, and there's a reason for it. There's a reason for it. Because, you know, if you're a Kohen and you have to do the work in the Beis HaMikdash, you put one foot wrong when you're doing the work of the Beis HaMikdash, you forfeit your life. So the Kohanim were under tremendous pressure. Tremendous pressure, and that's why they were very nervous people and very under tremendous pressure, because they had a tremendous responsibility to Hashem and to Klal Yisrael. And therefore, they had quick tempers, and they got very angry, very easily. To such an extent that the halacha realized that. The halacha actually recognized the fact that the Kohanim could get angry very quickly, so that there was a special get, a special document of divorce, only for Kohanim. They had a different get. They had a different get than any other Jew. It was much more complicated. It was written in a much more complicated way. It was sewn up in a very complicated way. And the whole point of it was that it was going to take time. It was going to take time to be able to prepare this get, because it wasn't a simple get like any other Jew would give his wife. It was a complicated, difficult get that you had to do, and it would take time to prepare this get. And the whole purpose of it was that they hoped that in the time it would take to prepare this get, the Kohen would calm down, lose his anger, and come back to his senses, and come and say, you know what, well, what am I doing? I don't want to divorce my wife. I was just flared up in a moment of anger, and I said, I'm going. So, you know, today, there's a question. People often think, you know, do we know today who are the genuine Kohanim, who are the not genuine Kohanim? We don't know. We don't know. But if one of the signs of being a genuine Kohen is that you get angry, then Leibs, bless him, was a genuine Kohen. Because Leibs himself admitted that he got angry, and he could get angry very quickly. But you know what? Being the good Jew that he was working on it. He worked on it. He knew that he got angry. He knew that he had this character trait of getting angry, which is natural for a Kohen. But the difference is, I remember him telling me on many times how he has to work on himself, how he's holding himself back in various situations, how he's got to work on himself to control his anger. So it should be a schus for him. And if we all work on controlling our anger, because of this year, that it should also be a schus for him, and it should give him an aliyas neshama. Thank you for listening. And anyone wants to ask questions or say anything, please do.
Do you know that Russell Manning lost his father?
I know.
Please just confirm that next Monday.
Oh, next Monday night, as you know, is Tisha B'Av. So obviously, next Monday night there will be no share. Unfortunately, we are going to be sitting on the floor saying kinnis and one thing and another, but Mi'at Hashem in 2 weeks' time. You still be here, Sid?
Yep.
Oh, good.
We can't just change the day. You just made it on Shabbos.